Hi, and hello, and a warm welcome to everyone joining us today. Welcome to our live. And if you're watching this event live, please put the word live in the comments. If you're watching it on the replay, you can put replay. We'd also like to know where you're watching us from. Please put that in the comments as well. I'm from the beautiful island of Barbados, so I have just started the ball rolling. My name is Gail, and I help small businesses create customer experience strategies. And how do I do that? It's by focusing on all of the many different things related to customer service, and that includes the training and upskilling of customer service teams. And today I'm excited to be joined by Jolene King, and we are going to be talking about the importance of prioritizing mental health awareness, especially if you work in customer service. So let me tell you a little bit now about Jolene. She's a fellow Barbadian, and she's an employee and workplace health specialist, an occupational psychologist, a mental health advocate, and an experienced HR professional with over 18 years in international business. Jolene is also a qualified mental health first aider and the principal consultant of 246 King Consulting. And this is a company which offers health and well-being services related to the design of business strategies, as well as mental health awareness training and absence management. So, as you can see, Jolene is definitely qualified to talk to us today, and let's bring her from the back of the stage. Welcome, Jolene. We are so
Hi,
excited to have you with us. Hi, and
thanks for
hello.
having me.
You're very welcome. So, let's get started. And I have some notes, some my questions. How did you get interested in mental health? What led you to where you are today?
Working as an HR partner, because I'm based in the UK. Yes, I'm a Barbadian based in the UK. So I was
Mm-hmm.
working at a company that does engineering. And I noticed that a lot of the long term absence was linked to mental health. And in order to advise managers better, I started doing a lot more reading. And that is what led me to more interest in the area. And on a personal front, I have a lot of family who've had to deal with mental health issues. So those two things combined. So from there, I did a lot of reading. I did qualifications in mental health. I've liaised with other mental health experts and advocates. And that's led me on this path.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think there's so much stigma attached to anything related to mental health? You only have to say the word and people break out in hives. Do you know why is that?
Well, first off, I have to say mental health is not mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
but there are a lot of people who equate the two together. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, nobody wants to be perceived as ill, nobody wants to be perceived as being weak. And when we talk about mental health, mental illness, there's this perception that something is wrong with the person. And in the past, when you look at how people with mental health challenges were dealt with, they were shunned, they were shut
Mm-hmm.
off, they were institutionalized, and nobody wants that experience to happen to them. So it's spoken about in hushed tones, or it's
Mm-hmm.
not at all, it's not acknowledged. And even
Yeah.
now, people still don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, because you don't want people to think that you're crazy. I think that's what
You
happens.
see,
People
that's
see you
another
as
thing.
crazy.
The language
She's crazy.
attached to it
Mm,
has a
yeah,
very negative connotation.
it is true. It is true. So I think everyone is aware that customer service workers, they are extremely underappreciated, underpaid.
Mhm.
They are, a lot of them, stressed out, burnt out, and generally, abused by customers a lot, verbally and otherwise.
Yes,
So how would
yes.
these job hazards contribute to poor mental health, and how would that affect their ability to serve their customers properly?
Well, first, I want to say that we all have brain chemicals, and two in particular, I want to highlight when it links to mental health and well being. Serotonin is when you're feeling significant and important among your peers. And if you lack
Mhm.
this, there's low self esteem, mood swings, insomnia, overly sensitive, you're feeling hopeless, you might get anxiety or panic attacks. So, a solution to that is getting exercise and getting out into the sunlight. So, like warehouse workers and people who are
Mm-hmm.
shut in all day, they're not getting that sunlight, so they will lack serotonin. And then there's dopamine, which enables motivation, learning, and pleasure. And again, if you're lacking this, the same low self esteem, procrastination, lack of motivation. So if you're lacking these things and receiving all this verbal abuse, and as you said, not just verbal abuse, but physical abuse, that's going to take a dent to your self esteem. So then
Mm-hmm.
that in turn has an impact on people's mental health. And that is where everything starts to unravel. Not feeling appreciated.
Yeah. So how would I know if someone on my team was stressed out or burnt out? Like what signs would I be looking for? And then when I see these signs that you're gonna tell us, what would you suggest that I do to support that person?
What to look for is any
Yeah, like
changes
any
in behavior.
behaviors. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
changes in behavior, changes in speech, speech patterns. If the
Wow,
person
speech
has
patterns.
withdrawn, yep. If the person is
Mm-hmm.
withdrawing, if they're doing things that are uncharacteristic, if you know somebody's naturally bubbly and all of a sudden they start being withdrawn, if there are changes in their appearance, if somebody is neglecting their appearance, that is
Mm-hmm.
another sign. Um, Also someone who's frequently absent or always is now complaining about headaches, joint
Mm-hmm.
pains,
Mm-hmm.
stomach cramps. All of those are early signs of stress or depression or other different aspects of mental health conditions. So those are some of the early signs.
Mm-hmm. And how would I support this person? So you and I work together and I realize
Mhm.
Jolene is not herself for some reason. How do I even begin to think about approaching you? Because some of us can be very private. We have stuff going on.
Of
We don't want to
course.
share. And I know that a lot of us, we don't want to share for fear of being judged or
Yep.
for that same stigma to be attached to us.
Hmm.
But as I keep telling people, I can't read your mind as much as I would like that to be one of my superpowers. And the only way
Mhm.
somebody can support you sometimes is if you share, not in a lot of detail, but just somehow. So, how would I try to begin to support you?
The first thing is to show compassion and ask people how they're doing and genuinely listen and pay attention to the response. Not that
Mm.
whole flippant,
You mean
how
don't
are
walk
you,
off
and
as you
taunting.
telling me, yeah, like, hi, how you doing? And I'm still walking. You
Exactly.
mean don't do that? Don't do that.
That's right. Pay attention to what
Yeah.
the person is saying and also pay attention to their body language because
Mm-hmm.
within that, you can spot some of those early signs as well.
Mm-hmm.
Listen without judgment
Mm-hmm.
and don't try to fix their problems. Signpost people to get help. You're not a counselor, you're not a trained psychologist. So don't
Mm-hmm.
try to diagnose people or treat people. You're just there
Mm-hmm.
to listen, be non judgmental, and signpost people to professional help.
Mm-hmm. So
And
if
do
I
this for yourself as well, not just for other
yes,
people.
that was gonna be my next question. So if I work in customer service and I was experiencing, verbal abuse from customers, I was stressed out, burnt out, my boss was giving me grief. How like what are the top three things you would tell me to do to look after my mental health? Because I guess at the end of the day, it's really my responsibility and not
Yeah,
my team's
absolutely.
responsibility or my manager's responsibility. But sometimes, we just try to make it work. I shared about that in a
Mm,
post recently where I was going through some stuff and my manager was telling me, oh, well, you're not the first person, you're not the first woman to go through divorce and you won't be the
yeah,
last. So just handle it. And I just really wanted a little understanding because I knew my performance was going to suffer.
yeah.
So how would I have managed my mental health per se better? Like what would I do other than what I wanted to do at the time but did not because
All right.
it would
You
have been
limited me
criminal.
to three.
Well, no,
You
you can
limited me to
share.
three, so
You
I'm
can
going to give
share. Do
you
you have
three.
five? You can share me five. You
I'm
can
giving
share
you three,
whatever.
not
The top
necessarily in
three.
any particular order, right?
Okay.
There's not in any particular order. Get adequate sleep and rest. The body must rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily prescriptive. You must have 8-10 hours sleep, but you must rest. And bear in mind, people in customer service generally do shift work, and that
Mm-hmm.
includes night work. That is
Mm-hmm.
hard on the body because human beings are supposed to be awake
Sleeping.
when the sun is
Mm-hmm.
up and sleeping when the moon is up,
Mm-hmm.
not any other variation. So you're actually going against your natural body rhythm. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to get adequate sleep and rest. And that's all different types of rest: spiritual rest, mental rest, social rest, psychological rest, emotional rest.
Mm-hmm.
Because your body can't settle if it is out of kilter. And we all know that. People will say something like, my spirit is uneasy because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you're not balanced and you're not resting. Have a
Mm-hmm.
structured routine. Schedule your
Mm-hmm.
life. There's nothing wrong with it. Schedule your life and your time, especially if you're working in customer service, because the job itself takes so much out of you.
Okay, so that's tip one. Let
And
me just put it in the chat. Can you tell me again? Get rest.
get adequate
Tip
sleep and rest.
tip number one, get adequate sleep and rest. Got it.
Number two, have a structured routine.
Mm-hmm.
And my third top tip, eat healthy and exercise regularly. I didn't want to separate those go together.
What's the last one? Sorry, I'm typing.
Eat healthy and
Ah.
exercise regularly.
Mm-hmm. And how am I doing that in the middle of all my shift work? I'm looking after my family and trying to make
Planning.
ends meet.
You have to plan. That's part of the structured routine. You have to plan
Okay.
your meals. Plan your meals for the week, not just for the day ahead. Plan if you have to write. Actually, it's better to write it down.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
on whatever day you're off, it might be the Sunday meal, the big Sunday meal. Separate your meals for the rest of the week so
Mm-hmm.
that when you have to go to work, you don't even have to think about what am I going to eat today. Everything's
Mm-hmm.
parcel out. The same way you will parcel out everything for the children, parcel out for yourself,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
including your snacks and your liquids.
Mm-hmm. And
So
I
you
would
don't have to be
say
thinking about, because worrying
correct.
about what you're going to eat is a problem.
Well, Jolene, I was going to say worrying about what you're going to wear if you don't have a uniform. That's the next problem because I guess what you're saying
Plan,
is whatever you could reduce in terms of not being
stress
able to
levels.
decide,
Yes.
take it out. So plan what you're going to wear, plan what you're going to eat, plan when you're going to be exercising, when you're going to be dealing with the
Yes.
children. Just write it out and try to plan it.
Not just when you're going to exercise, where you're going to exercise and with what.
Ah, okay.
Mm,
All right. So somebody has a question about
I
that.
saw
I know
that.
I knew it was gonna come because I was gonna ask it. So what do you suggest for those that may have insomnia? It's okay to talk about rest. Jolene, I don't know if it's happened to you. You lay down
I've had insomnia.
and
It's
you want to
awful.
sleep. So you said 10 o'clock, I'm gonna lay down, and you're staring at the ceiling. Your mind is going crazy. You're thinking of all the different things you didn't do during the day that you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're wondering about all these random things, like why did that person overtake me in the corner? Why did that person jam bust me? Why doesn't my son listen? So that's insomnia. Like you don't get to sleep till like 12, 1 a.m. and you've been in the
That's
bed.
if you sleep at all.
Okay, well,
I've
talk
had
to
a
us.
bout of
Talk
insomnia
to
that
us.
lasted for 4 weeks and I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
sleeping at all.
Wow.
So, insomnia, one thing it's important about health and well being, another tip, which I didn't include, would be to
Mm-hmm.
have it's about your sleep hygiene and to have a
Mm-hmm.
sleep routine to avoid the insomnia if you can. You go to sleep and wake up at the same times every day, including weekends. Don't think you're gonna have a late night just because it's Friday night. Go to sleep
Mm-hmm.
the same time every night. Your bedroom is supposed to be set for sleep and nothing else. In other words, there's not supposed to be a television in there.
Mm-hmm. I knew you were gonna say that.
There's not supposed to be a blaring radio going all night long.
Mm-hmm.
The room temperature is supposed to be right. You should be having clean linen. You should
Mm-hmm.
be trying to get a shower before you go to bed actually helps. There are things that you can do. I mean,
What
They're
about
sleep
aromatherapy?
specialists. So
What
I
about
don't think we have
aromatherapy?
enough. Yes, lavender is very good.
Thank you. I was going to
I
ask
use
what
a
would help
lavender
that.
spray. You can use lavender spray or lavender oil on your pillow. Helps
Nice.
you to go to
Mm-hmm.
sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But there are different things for different people. But one thing for sure, you have to have a sleep routine and your bedroom has to be set up for sleep. I've actually put out, it was last year when I put out a flyer and infographic about sleep and top tips about how to get a good night's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And those are just some of the things. So Dawn, I hope that helps. But
Mm-hmm.
if this is something that's been going on for a while, you do need to see a medical professional because a lack of sleep impacts on your physical and mental well-being, and your body starts to run down. You get susceptible to colds and flus, and you start to get really ill. So
Mm-hmm.
you do need to rest.
Yeah, that is a good one. So I have my 3 tips for myself as an individual. So let's go over
Uh,
now to the managers and supervisors, the people who are managing me, and even
uh,
business owners, because
yeah.
we want them to understand that this is important. What can they do, and what should they do to make sure the mental health of their team is intact? What are some of the
Lead
ways?
by example is the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to be taking care of yourself if you want people to start to take care of themselves. So eating lunch at your desk and then telling people go and take their lunch break away from your desk is not going to work. You have to walk the walk
Mm-hmm.
if you're talking the talk. Lead by example. Look at what your company policies and procedures are. Are they family friendly? Do people get time off if there's a family emergency or if there's a medical emergency? Or does it always have to be unpaid? Because then people will feel penalized if they ever have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And is there occupational sick pay? I'm not talking about statutory. Is there anything over and above that? Because what's going to happen if people aren't getting paid for being sick is they will go to work probably ill and contagious and get other people ill. And
Mm-hmm.
also, they're showing up to work and not being 100%, which is what we call presenteeism. That's
Mm-hmm.
low
Mm-hmm.
activity. You're not getting the best out of people, so they might as well not be there.
Mm-hmm.
And health and safety is another thing that people need to look at. And we spoke about the verbal and physical abuse that people might be on the receiving end of. Is there, and this is something I have never seen anywhere in Barbados, but it's in the UK. Are there signs all over the establishment that say we will not tolerate any abuse towards our employees. And if it happens, you will be refused service.
Yeah.
That should be a company policy across the board. We
Mm-hmm.
can't tolerate adults' bad behavior. Leave
Mm-hmm.
the premises. We
Mm-hmm.
will not serve you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that has to come from the top because if an employee says, I'm not serving you, they might get into trouble for withholding services for the company, etc. So that has to be something that comes from the top.
Mm-hmm.
Managers, supervisors regularly checking with your employees the same way that we talked about. If you're working with somebody and you notice that they're not feeling well and you ask them how they're doing, people need to be asking each other how they're doing on a regular basis and checking in. Because even now, if you've got people working shifts and irregular hours, who's checking in on them? Especially people who do lone working. You can feel very isolated if you're on your own.
Okay. So you're back, Jolene. I think we were slightly frozen.
Oh, I was talking.
I
Did
know you were talking. So just go back a little bit. Just go back just a little bit. Maybe the
okay.
last minute.
I was talking about doing regular check-ins.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I'm looking at the chat to see if anybody caught that. All right, so
Okay.
regular check-ins
Mm-hmm.
and communicate with people honestly. There's nothing worse than being in an organization where you constantly feel like you're being lied to. And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the psychological safety. Can you
Mm-hmm.
trust what people are, oh, they heard me perfectly.
Yeah,
Can
great.
you trust what people are saying? Can you trust what they're telling you? Just because they're paying you every 2 weeks, every month, whatever, every week, can you actually believe what they're telling you? And that is really important. Um, Also look at the job design. Is it designed that people can actually perform their tasks to the optimum? I know we've got artificial intelligence, we've got automation, technology. Are we using those things? Because let me give you an example. There are still organizations that are using paper forms to complete basic tasks. And then after that form is completed, somebody has to take it, key in that information into a spreadsheet, and then another person is supposed to run a report so you can see that information. That makes no sense. Have
Mm-hmm.
automated forms. Not saying you cut out people's jobs, you align them to do other things. But it's
Mm-hmm.
just there's so much wastage when it comes to how things are done, because that is a very much a 1970s 1980s way of doing things. This is 2022. Make people's lives easier, especially when there are repetitive tasks that people have to perform.
Mm-hmm.
What about the workplace itself? The ergonomics. Are people sitting at comfortable desks, chairs? Is the lighting right? Barbados has a lot of sick building syndrome, and then people get ill. So we have to look
Mm-hmm.
at that as well. And on top of all of that, find out what people's needs are. What do they want? Because it's all well and good to say, okay, we're gonna have a gym. We're gonna give people an additional day off work, but do they want that? Or maybe they want something else. So do what I like to call pulse surveys,
Yes.
depending on how
Mm-hmm.
large your organization is. But in departments, find out what people want, compile that information, have conversations, have town hall meetings, find out what people want. And on top of all of that, you need to have a well-being policy if you don't have it already. And then I know this might seem a bit revolutionary for Barbados and do more than what is statutory required. Just because it's not law doesn't mean you don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So give people a little bit more vacation. Give people the maternity and paternity leave in Barbados is abysmal. Organizations who are making money every year and paying out dividends to their shareholders can do better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, does anyone have a menopause policy? That is another thing that people don't like to talk about. And
Mm-hmm.
it
I
will
don't think
affect
they take
all
menopause
women.
seriously. Yeah, they
And it will
really don't.
affect all women and by extension, all men. It affects everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a cold, okay? This is a period of a woman's life that can take years.
Yeah.
And a lot of women, unfortunately, are leaving the workplace early because of menopause symptoms. And you're losing a workforce because of that. And that's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
So organizations need to get with the times. What is that? Dawn, what are you asking me about? What is
Mm-hmm.
what? A menopause policy?
Well, actually, I was going to ask like what kind of items would go into a well-being policy, but I wanted to confirm that everybody could see me because I seem to be having some very minor internet connectivity issues on my end. Because Jolene, I can hear you really good. So yes, what sort of things would be in that policy?
In
Which
the
one,
menopause
Don? In the
policy.
okay, in the
Okay,
menopause policy.
so
Okay.
in any policy, you have to identify what it is you're addressing. So it has to start with the definition of menopause, and you would be using whatever the national health definition is to start with. And then it is about what is the organization's obligation to address those who are being affected by menopause.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be because ordinarily If people are having hot flashes, they might need a fan next to them because they can't go and change the central air condition because then somebody else is going to be too cold and that sort of thing. So, yes, Jacqueline, I understand well-being can incorporate menopause, but it is good that they are separated so it doesn't get lost. That's my view on it. So going back to what else should be in the menopause policy, it is about making reasonable adjustments in order to address anybody who is suffering from menopause symptoms, whether that be time off to go to any appointments that they might have. If they're under HRT and they have to pay for it, the organization might help subsidize. It all depends on the needs of that particular organization. But there are just some things and also guidelines for managers about how to interact with someone who is suffering from menopause.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the basic things that can go
I
into a
think that
menopause
for me, the
policy.
guidelines would be the most important. This is what you
Yeah.
need to do to look after your people with menopause. I mean, I was lucky I had
The,
my own plan, but then when somebody else needed it, I lost it. But at least I had it for a little while.
yeah.
Yes. And I don't think that people take menopause seriously. And I was reading somewhere recently because this is Mental Health Awareness Month, and it seems like everybody talks about everything they don't normally talk about. And the conversation surrounded women and what they go through with their menstrual cycle every month. Some people, it's not a breeze for everybody. Some people have it very
That's the
bad in terms of
menstrual
pain.
policy,
Yeah, so
which
they
is
were saying,
different
do
than the
I get
menopause policy.
I
They're
know,
two
but
different policies.
so my
Yeah.
question is, should they include that as well, seeing that that has come up now, is not only about menopause, it's about how bad is my menstrual cycle, what am I feeling, how bad are my cramps, why do you look at me differently because I need to take a day off, like the first day of every month, because I can't work.
Depending on the organization, they could include it as a clause in their sickness absence policy, just to say that women will not be penalized in any way if they take time off. Because, a lot of organizations, they have absence triggers. If you go sickness absence triggers, if you go over a certain amount, then there's certain steps that will go. So first off is a conversation, and then it might lead to a warning and that sort of thing. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if someone who may have endometriosis totally out of their control, their first 2 days, they can't get out of bed. They miss 2 days every month of work through
Mm-hmm.
no fault of their own. It's just their body. So those are the types of things that you could put into your sickness absence management policy, as opposed to having a separate menstruation policy, which might just end up being one page.
Mm-hmm.
So it all depends on the organization. But it really should be in there because you got to get with the times.
Mm-hmm.
Because that also ties in with shouldn't be penalized. Because also you got to look at chronic illnesses and what is now going to get incorporated possibly is like long COVID. If somebody has
Mm-hmm.
long COVID and is missing work, you can't penalize them for that because it's not their fault. The
Mm-hmm.
same way with someone that has a disability and they might end up missing work. You can't penalize them for that either. So I think a lot of organizations have to do a revamp with their policies and procedures to tie in with the overall well-being strategy for the organization. And I do know that Barbados has a national wellness policy, but it is not part of legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not legislation, people will do it if they want to, and some people just won't because it's not
Mm-hmm.
deemed a priority in their eyes. But it does need to be a priority because healthy employees will be productive and unhealthy ones won't be.
Mm-hmm. So I agree 300%. And my kind of last question would be, do you think people are aware that when you experience bad customer service, there's always a backstory? I don't think people go out of their way to offer bad service, but if you do a little research, there's always a back end reason. Have you found that as well? And I will share a little bit of what some of those reasons could be, but I just wanted to ask you first. What do you think about that?
Of course, but do people care? They
Yes,
want what they
they
want
don't.
when they want it
They do.
because they're paying for a service. They're not interested in your backstory. And they will
Mm-hmm.
tell you that. And if you
Mm-hmm.
work for an organization that doesn't care about your backstory, then there's nobody to support you on your off days because you can't always be switched on. You can't always be the happy person on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
It's not realistic.
So this ties back to your comment earlier about the value of pulse surveys, because sometimes business owners are so far removed from what is actually going on in their
Mhm.
business, even not in retail per se. You could be the doctor in your doctor's office and stuff is going on in the reception area where you're not even aware of how your receptionist is treating your clients, stuff like that. But people need to understand, especially business owners, the value of the pulse surveys so that they can talk to their employees and as well use the information, the surveys from their customers to see where they're going right and where they're going wrong and how they're frustrating people. So, like, I know, for example, if I use Barbados as an example, you can have a business that says, you know what, we're getting too many return checks. No more return checks from anybody. It has to be
Mhm.
cash, we're swiping your card, whatever it is. And then Jolene comes and she is my uncle's wife's child, whatever. And Jolene is insisting she is paying by check. And you know what? Yes, Jolene speaks to the business owner. Oh, yes, I know, Jolene, take her check. But you have just told
Mhm.
everybody else no more checks. And of course, the person after Jolene is going to see Jolene give her check and wonder, oh, why can't I pay with my check? And I think that's just
Mhm.
a small example of the mixed messages, the mixed signals we give these employees. It could be lack of scheduling staff, rostering staff adequately because you don't want to pay them. It could be so many little things which contribute to bad customer service
Mhm.
and that need to be addressed. But you can't just, hide your head under the sand and pretend that it doesn't exist because, like you said, you look after your employees will look after your customers, and we need to empower them to make decisions. They're not dumb.
Of course.
And when they make a
And
mistake, guide them and help them. So I think the policy too is very important. Policy is important in getting people to support each other. I don't know what you found.
and and to summarize that from me, I will say it's not just about the customer experience, it's about the employee
Employee
experience
experience.
because
Mm-hmm.
employees can break your business.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
before they actually walk out the door, they get disengaged.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to withdrawal of services, and some will sabotage your business before they actually walk out the door.
Mm-hmm. And you will wonder how come. Why is that happening?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so this is my last question now. Can you share a little bit about the concept of absence management, which is something that your company offers? I'm not sure a lot of people are familiar with that as a service. So, can you tell us a little bit about what that would entail? If I wanted absence management services from you, what would that look
Hmm.
like?
Well, first off, I would be examining the statistics. If you don't have any, then it
Mm-hmm.
is about using the tools that I have to collate data in order to look at absence trends.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing, looking at the trends is about frequency and reasons,
Mm-hmm.
because oftentimes you only spot problems when you can actually see the data. So once that happens, it is about putting measures in place, and it ties in with the well-being. If you're seeing people who always have musculoskeletal problems, backaches, perhaps it is that you need to look at refreshing or actually doing training for manual handling,
Mm-hmm.
and that can reduce some of it. Or also, you could have a service where you are signposting people or bringing an occupational health nurse, those types of things. So
Mm-hmm.
that is part of the absence management service that is very much tied in with health and well-being.
Nice. Well, great. I don't see any questions in the chat. There's been lots of great information about there's actually a new menopausal clinic in Barbados.
Yes, I saw that.
People are very appreciative. Don is saying, sometimes attitude and culture flow from the head. I quite agree. It has to start at the top. And I'm actually sharing, if you want to contact or connect with Jolene, here are the links to
Yep,
her website.
that's
This is
right.
how you can also connect with her on LinkedIn.
Mm.
And it has been great to have everybody here. I want to thank everybody who joined us. If there are no more questions, Jolene, do you want to wrap it up for us today, please?
Um, it starts for me with self-care. Something you said,
Mm-hmm.
Gail, that I will. Your health is your responsibility. Don't leave it for
Mm-hmm.
anybody else. So take care of yourself. We've done the top tips. Get adequate rest, sleep, have a structured routine, have boundaries, learn to say no in
Mm-hmm.
a professional way, eat healthy, exercise regularly, volunteer your time, get out into the natural light if you can, be in nature. And from there, I would just say, be kind to yourself and show yourself some grace and compassion. Every
Mm-hmm.
day will not be a great day, but it is all about your attitude and perceptions that could make the next day better.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Be kind to yourself. We're not kind
And be
to
kind to others as
ourselves.
well.
Oh well, yeah, yes, it is true. But I'm saying, sometimes you think of the other person first. It's like you can't serve
Mm,
yourself. You can't serve from an empty cup. But you need to be kind
true.
to yourself, and then you can be kind to others.
That's right.
That's a very good one. So thanks everybody for joining us. We will be back again. I'm gonna try to persuade Jolene to do a part 2. She's just come back from vacation. She's well rested and looking lovely. So I have to give her time to
And
get some
tanned.
of her work
So
done. Yes, she's tan, so she's saying. So thanks to everybody for joining us. This was a really great conversation, and we will be back again soon. Thank you, Jolene. It's always a
you
pleasure
are
to have
welcome.
you joining us. So bye everybody, and we will see you again very soon. Have a fantabulous, marvelous, magical Monday.
Yes.